Welcome to College Admissions Toolbox, giving you the edge you need to get into the colleges of your dreams, with your host, Steve Schwartz. That's me. We're going to split this one up into 2 episodes because there was so much good information that we couldn't fit it all into one. Enjoy.
Welcome to College Admissions Toolbox, Janine. How are you doing today?
I'm great. I'm doing really well. How are you?
Awesome, thank you. Now, Janine, I'm so excited to feature you on the program today. You have a great story. You've worked as an editor and reporter for top newspapers. You've also worked as a high school English teacher. Now you help students with the college essay. Tell us a little bit about your personal life. How you got to where you are today.
Oh, let's see. My background is it was journalism, and I was a staff reporter for newspapers like the Miami Herald and the Orange County Register here in Southern California. I did that for about 15 years, and then I shifted into magazines. I was an editor, magazines, local magazines. I freelanced. And while I was doing that, I had my own 2 children. And when my oldest daughter, was time for her she was a junior in high school, and it was time for her looking for colleges. She had to write her essay. And of course, she didn't really want my help, but I intervened. And she was like a lot of kids. She just didn't think she had anything to write about, really had no clue how to even approach the essay. So we brainstormed, and we kind of came up with this formula to help her zero in on a quality that would show something unique about herself to the colleges. And then we went deeper and tried to find some real life examples that she could use to illustrate that quality. And so her essay turned out great. She got into all the schools she applied to. She got a great scholarship. And she ended up going to a college called Hendrix College outside of Little Rock, Arkansas. Fabulous school, and she got I think like half of it was a merit scholarship, and she was a B student, and so I just sort of saw the power that these essays have, and I also just saw how students really, a lot of students, nobody has taught them how to write the kind of essay that you need on to craft a personal statement, and then I started to realize that my background in newspaper writing and magazine writing, where you tell other people's stories, really was so similar to the types of skills that students need to write these college essays. And then, of course, I had gone back and gotten my credential to teach high school English, so I sort of had, I knew that world as well. So anyway, people started asking me to help them with their kids' essays, and I really enjoyed the process. As you know, working with students, it's so dreaded. There's so much pressure on these essays. But once a student, can find a topic or something that they really are interested in, then the whole process is much easier, and they, believe it or not, sometimes end up actually enjoying it. So I enjoy that process, helping students find their stories, and also to teach them how to write them in a style that's appropriate and effective for these essays. So
absolutely, Janine. Well, that's quite a journey you've had. First of all, congratulations on your daughter's enormous college scholarship. I'm sure that was nice to receive. What I'm really interested in is this formula you were mentioning. The college essay formula that you developed. Mm-hmm. Walk us through the steps of how you came to develop that formula. Was there a pivotal moment in your experience working with your daughter?
Yeah, let's see. The idea is, as these essays, everybody tells students, oh, you need to be yourself, and you need to stand out, you need to make this impression. And so, everybody knows what you want in an essay, but what I saw is nobody was really teaching kids how to do it. And in English classes, they teach them how to write those sort of formal academic essays, find a theme and compare and contrast and use the 5-paragraph essay. They're boring, and they do not, nobody teaches kids this style of writing where you leverage stories, real life stories. And that type of writing is called narrative writing. Yeah. So once I sort of realized that, I really started analyzing these essays and trying to figure out how to teach writing them. And going back to my daughter, what we did, we thought, well, she was interested in art, and we thought, well, what are some of the qualities or characteristics that she had that would make her effective in art? And one of them was, oh, you're really creative. That's what came out. And we thought, all right, so how do you write an essay that showcases this quality that you have? And so we brainstormed sort of real life moments or examples, little mini experiences from her life that she could include in her essay that would illustrate that quality of being creative. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I like it.
Yeah. So we were brainstorming, and we were thinking of, you sort of look back over time. Now I advise kids, you don't really need to go back to when you were a toddler necessarily.
Sure.
It's better to kind of brainstorm high school years, maybe junior high, when you're looking for those little real life stories. But this was our first one. So we thought about this time that my daughter, she was like 3 or 4, had markers, and she was drawing, which she liked to do. And I walked out of the room, came back, and she had drawn all over her whole body. Yeah, so we thought, well, that's an example of how she's creative. And we also then tried to focus, how is she creative, to give that essay even more focus. And we thought about how her sort of philosophy, and one that I sort of tried to support, and some of her art teachers, that draw outside of the lines. And we thought, well, this is a great example if you draw all over your body, right?
And that's quite outside the lines there. I like it. Very
outside the lines. So that's what we did. So we said, now how I had background creating, using this type of writing device called an anecdote. Mm-hmm. And it's really where you just take a real life moment that maybe lasted a couple minutes, maybe 5 minutes, and you retell that. You use, and you use some of those creative writing techniques where you're really trying to recreate that moment and put the reader back in time. It's almost as though you're creating a little snippet of video. A lot of times they'll have some dialogue in them. It's almost like you're reading fiction, a novel. So they're very storytelling, very engaging. So we tried to recreate that little moment when, she was standing at the kitchen table, and her mom walked in and found her, covered with green magic marker from head to toe. And then there was I think she included something that I said, like, what did you do? And then we talked about, instead of getting punished for it, she was actually encouraged, and then we went on.
Janine, you cut out for 1 second.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Would you mind just going back?
Going back over that? Yeah, because this
is
the approach that any student can use. Find one of your qualities. You're creative, you're patient, you're insightful, you're stubborn, you're persistent. Take that quality and then think of some little moment or something that happened in your past that kind of proves it, that illustrates it. And then you can use that, just retell that little moment in the introduction of your essay. And it's just this natural grabber, instead of a gimmicky hook. It's just this little engaging story. So with my daughter, she had drawn all over herself. So we recreated that moment in one paragraph. We just sort of started with there's no leading up to it. It was just sort of this idea that, sitting at the kitchen table, I had started drawing on my hand, and then it went all over I drew all over my body. And then my mom walked in. And then there was like a quote of what I guess I had said, something like, "What are you doing?" And then, so there's that little moment. You can kind of visually, you can see her, this little girl, all covered in marker with a big smile on her face. And then we sort of backed it up. Then you sort of back up in time and set the background or what led up to that, or you put it in the context. And then she was set to sort of talk about this idea of what creativity is for her, and the value of drawing outside the lines, and that was how she expressed herself. And then she worked into the essay other examples that were more relevant or more current, like from high school, of other examples of how she learned the power and the importance of expressing herself and going outside the lines. And so you read this essay, it's engaging with a little story, and then it gives her a platform to kind of share and express other examples of how she's creative and what is creativity to her. So you get this picture of what she thinks, what she cares about, and a piece of what makes her, unique. And it's her philosophy on what creativity is. So anyway, it's a nice little formula, and you don't have to follow it to the T, but for a lot of students, it's just a way to get started, to find your story and to tell them, and then extract meaning from it as well. So, does that make sense? Can you?
Oh no, absolutely, Janine. Yeah. This is awesome. I love it. I agree with every single thing you just said, and so I hope our listeners really paid close attention and listen to that again and again, because you just dropped so many knowledge bombs with the idea of anecdotes, sharing concrete examples, giving those details. I'm always telling students, show, don't tell. Right. I don't want to hear, they're not going to want to hear the vague generalities about, I'm a creative person, I'm a patient person, I'm a people person, I'm a leader. Show us how you're a leader. Show us how you're creative. Show us the time that you drew all over yourself, or maybe something more recent, a more recent example, your sketchbook, your doodle book, or give us an example of a time that you exhibited leadership qualities. I don't want to hear about how you're a leader. I want to hear about a time that you were a leader. And so this essay, college essay formula that you're describing to us is so valuable, and I hope that all of our listeners take this to heart and apply it with their own specific situations and their own life experiences and interests. So thank you so much for sharing that, Janine.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, I just really like that. I think students all have stories, and somebody just needs to give them a few steps that they can take so that they see it's not that hard to tell your own. And you're right, you should show with an example. Who wants to read? If my daughter had written her essay and said, I'm a very creative person, I love to create things, blah, 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 would you want to read that? No, it's boring, So instead, pick an example of how you are, whatever quality or characteristic you want to showcase. It's just much more interesting. And as you know, part of the game is that these admissions officers, they read a zillion of these essays. So,
absolutely.
And so that is how you stand out. You don't stand out by coming up with some gimmicky, cutesy first line. Instead, just come up with a couple qualities that are sort of core to who you are. Pick one of them and brainstorm some examples, and start with that example, and you're pretty much set to go. Because then after you talk about that example, you can talk about what it means, how you think about it. Then you flush out your other ideas, and you can get more analytical, a little more insightful, and those kind of things that make the essay, give them more depth. And
absolutely. You start with the anecdote and zoom out from there, and you make sure that you're illustrating with real life examples, keeping those admission officers engaged with the thousands and thousands of essays that they're reading. They gotta, spend only a couple minutes on each one, so make sure that you grab their attention.
Exactly. And you know what? And trust what you find interesting. I always encourage students, read these sample essays. Just do a search online. There's books. I have a book that, collects student essays. It's so helpful because you can go through them and you'll go, oh my God, they wrote about how they have crazy red hair. They wrote an essay about that. And it can just sort of spur ideas for you, for your topics. And you can also see how they write in this narrative style. So it's just very empowering to read what other kids have written. And when you read an essay and you're like, and you find it interesting, trust that. You learn to trust whatever you find interesting. That's what admissions counselors will find interesting too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can make almost any topic interesting. It's about how you go about writing about that topic. And just like you can look at other folks' essays, have other people look at your essay and confirm that something is working or not working. You can exchange with your friends. You could show these to teachers and other trusted people. Your parents are useful, but they definitely shouldn't be the only people because they're a little bit biased. you got to go to a variety of people, have a variety of people with experience, looking at this and giving advice and feedback. So definitely getting extra help is key, and looking at those examples is also really helpful. So
let me ask you this, Steve. You've probably seen this. A lot of parents, they want to be helpful, but a lot of them are they're out of touch, and they have this idea that these essays need to be really impressive and sort of formal, and where they want you to like cram in all the great things that you've done in your life. And they're well-intentioned, your parents, and English teachers can do this too, and even college counselors. But the problem with that is those essays are boring. And so you really need to use your own, trust yourself that above all, these essays need to be interesting. And so they're not as formal. It's a different type of writing where you write a little more like you talk, and you're really writing in a more familiar tone. But it's just sort of a red flag out there that there are parents that what they think makes a good essay isn't necessarily these days, especially what is a good essay. And I've also seen now a lot of English teachers teach these essays, the end of the junior year, beginning of senior year, and they'll give students like an A+, and then I'll read the essay, and if it's really dense and it just tries to have this big laundry list of all their talents and accomplishments, I'm like, that's not a great essay necessarily. So it doesn't mean that parents and other people can help you, but in the end, just remember that your essay needs to be interesting, and it's a different style than some people, think. Have you seen that at all?
Well, absolutely, Janine. I couldn't agree more. I definitely come across, a lot of high school English teachers these days are assigning the college essay as an in-class assignment.
Right.
And the problem is some of these English teachers know what makes a good narrative style, but there are others who don't really know too much about the college admissions process. And why should they? They're teaching great works of literature. They might know what's grammatically correct.
Yep.
And they might know about, proper word choice, diction, sentence structure, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it'll pass Microsoft Word's grammar check, but is it going to work for the admission officers who's reading their 1,500th essay at 2 a.m. and they're spending 2-3 minutes on it? Is it going to capture their attention? There's a reason that college essays are sometimes called personal statements as well. They're personal. It's meant to be about you. Personally, I think using the word I think using the first person is okay. It's about you.
Right. Oh, no, I always advise my students, personal is great because personal means that you're making a connection. And to be personal, you have to open yourself up, and sometimes it's even really powerful to reveal some of your weaknesses or your flaws because you make that connection, and that's what the whole point of these essays is. It's not to be bragging or touting all your great things. It's really more about being yourself and forging some kind of bond, with those admissions officers. So
totally. You want to make them like you.
That's exactly right. And that sounds kind of weird. Like, how do you make somebody like you? Well, think about what makes you like other people. I like people who have talents, but they're humble about it, and so that's why it's really important to, not boast about what you've done or not try to write about the most impressive topics, but look for, topics that are in kind of from everyday life. They call them mundane topics. And it's sort of counterintuitive, but it's so powerful that the best essays a lot of times spring from just the most everyday topic you'd never even expect to make a great essay. There's this example of I had a student. She was one of these top performers. She was always the main singer in the musicals, that type of thing. And she ended up writing her essay about her obsession with karaoke. And it was the best essay because it was so true to something she sort of had this funny passion for. It was something that was not, revealed anywhere else in her application. And it was so humble, it wasn't, I'm the star of, Oklahoma, which is sort of boring, but she was just talking about this crazy obsession with karaoke. And it was a great essay. And she was likable because it was something that we sort of relate with. But that idea when you're fishing around for topics to look for the everyday, whether it's like how you love to ride public buses or how you, mundane, how you spend a summer scooping ice cream at Haagen-Dazs. Just those types of topics are just much more powerful, and they have a natural humility about them. And that makes you come across as more likable, I think.
I'm so on board with you there, Janine. You really hit the nail on the head. I mean, I get so many kids coming to me who are like, I didn't start an NGO to help kids in Uganda. I'm not impressive. What am I going to write about? And there are only a handful of kids who've done something like that. Believe me, like most kids in college are not, already Nobel Prize winners or something like that, or Olympic athletes.
Right.
I had a student who wrote a great essay about how he spent the entire season, soccer season sitting on the bench. He wasn't the team captain, but what's involved in that experience? We don't want to hear someone just bragging. I want to hear someone who had who experienced a moment of growth or had a moment of personal insight. And those mundane topics, it's about the lessons you learn from them, the values that you extract from them, and how you grow as a person and show that you're mature and ready to take on the challenge that is college.
That's exactly right. And what I don't know about you, but I sort of come across if there's two camps of students, there's some that they have had some crazy thing happen in their life, in their background, and maybe it was they had a dad who is an alcoholic, or they had a sister who is autistic, or they were going blind. There are a lot of students out there who are facing and dealing with really heavy stuff. And in my opinion, if you're going through something like that, it can't help but define you. And I encourage the student to explore that as their essay topic. It's almost like, how could you not write about that? And then there's students that are like, my life's sort of boring. I do all the right stuff. I play soccer, I play French horn, but I don't have anything interesting. And to me, those are the students that I say, don't look for impressive crises, like crazy, intense topics. Shift over into that world of the mundane. Check out, what did you do for your summer job? Look about what you're obsessed with. What do you like to collect? Just look in. A lot of times they're the topics that you would almost go, oh my God, I can never write my essay about this. Those make great topics, So I don't know if you've seen that. I've just sort of seen two camps of students when they're fishing around for topics.
Absolutely, there are some kids who have that one impressive extracurricular, and they choose to write about that. And they could be the one who helped the orphans in Uganda or something like that.
Right.
And that's fine. If you have that experience, definitely talk about that.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if you were the bench warmer on the soccer team, or you were the kid who scooped ice cream, own that mundane topic. Own that topic that everyone else, might perceive as boring, and all the other kids applying to college are just going to think, should I even include that on my activity sheet? And be the kid who owns that topic, and be that the kid where the admission officers are sitting around, they're like, the karaoke girl, we want her because she wrote the most fascinating essay about her obsession with karaoke. Or the kid who had a personal breakthrough sitting on the bench.
Right. No, I love that, and that I just want to assure every student, you do have something to write about. Just trust that it doesn't have to be super impressive. It's really not what you write about. It's what you have to say about it. So if you look in those mundane topics, look at your fears, look at your phobias. One thing I tell my kids, if you're looking for those little mini stories, look for a time something that involved a problem. If you look at in your English classes, the teachers would say, what makes a story? You need a character and a conflict, right? You have to have somebody, and then you have to have bad stuff happen. They run into obstacles, challenges, and then you have a story. That's what you should be looking for. So if you're brainstorming those interesting little moments, think back about times when there was some sort of problem. You had a conflict with somebody, there was a challenge, there was an obstacle, something, you wanted something, but something got in the way. You made a mistake, there was an accident, there was a big change in your life. All those, quote, problems, those are great stories, because it's not interesting when everything's going well. We don't want to read about that. But when you have that little problem, you instantly have something that's interesting that we want to read. And what's beautiful about that is the minute you sort of spell out that little problem, you're poised to then go into, okay, I have this problem, made me feel crummy, it was a low point, but there's at one point I said, okay, I'm going to turn it around. And you can share the steps that you took to deal with it. And then you can talk about what you learned from it, like how you thought about it, how it made you feel, those types of more reflective things. So if you're looking for those little stories, think back about times when you had some little type of a problem, like the kid that was benched, right? That you said was a good story. What was his problem? Absolutely. He was on the bench, So if you look, when you're reading sample essays, see the ones that grab your attention and see if there's a little problem in there. And there always is. So it's just another way to find your good stories. I mean, I know you're talking about like those kids that did go to Uganda and work with orphans, those mission trips. And as you know, they're considered a little cliche, but they're still super cool, impressive things that kids do when they go to countries and work with kids. And so what I say with those types of things, don't write about, I went to Uganda, I learned so much, I love working with kids. Try to think about something specific that happened when you were over there, a problem, when some little thing went wrong, some little story, and then you can start your essay with that, and then all that cool, interesting, impressive stuff that you happen to be in Uganda working with orphans is still there, but it's in the backdrop, and your story is actually much more interesting to read. So that's how I sort of, if a student has done some, like I climbed Mount Whitney, impressive thing, how to write about it and still make it interesting and not sort of braggy is to find one little thing that happened while you were climbing Mount Whitney, a problem when something went wrong. Start with that, and it'll just be a more interesting essay.
Absolutely. So many powerful nuggets here. Definitely, the idea of taking a problem, an obstacle you experienced, and overcoming it. Because you're absolutely right. Every story has some sort of conflict. It could be an inner conflict. It could be a conflict with someone else. But definitely, even if your topic's a little bit cliche, potentially, find that way to go deep into it so that your essay will defy categorization. Right. Where it's not just another Uganda trip essay or not another, my leadership on the soccer team essay. Right. Find a way, delve into that specific instance or example where you experienced the problem and had to overcome it. Show that moment of vulnerability or difficulty. Make yourself likable, and then show how you grow from the experience. Absolutely. Exactly. In fact, as you know, they just changed one of the 5 Common App prompts. Yeah. And so now I think it's the 4th prompt, literally asks something like, talk about a time when you had a problem. So there's a reason that prompt is worded that way, because it just sets you up to tell an interesting story. They're also the one about, talk about a time when you had a failure. I think that's the 2nd prompt. Again, failure. What's a failure? It's a problem. So again, those are I think those are great prompts to try to brainstorm off of. And I think the Common App prompt 1 now talk about an interest, identity, background. I can't remember the 3 things, but I would say, like, if you're going to write about a talent, how is that going to be? How do you make that interesting and not braggy? I would say, think about a time that there's some problem related to whatever your talent is. Say you're the chair 1 violin player. Think about something that tried to get in your way of your talent or your experience. And that's just a way to get into writing about something like a talent, but making it interesting, staying humble and likable, and still showcasing it. Yeah, absolutely. It can't be I was born a chess genius or I was born playing the violin, you know? There's the whole Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours idea. And there's some truth to that, you know, how did you develop that, the practice, the time you put in? What were the obstacles you faced in finding that number of hours to develop this skill?
Right, exactly. Yep.
Totally.
Yeah, so, and you know what's sort of interesting is a lot of students, I mean, they're just on this crazy race to college. They're taking the AP, you know, all the hard classes, extracurriculars. They've never really slowed down and just taken a moment to kind of look back and see what they've done. It's really remarkable. So it's sort of, I think, fun when students just take a little bit of time and look back over some of their experiences. And you do have great stories. And I just look at it, the great stories are the ones that, like, you remember coming home, you couldn't wait to tell your dad about. You wouldn't believe what happened, you know, to me. Or you can't wait to tell your best friend. You know, it's like, you would not believe this is so weird this happened. Those are those stories. The stories that you can't wait to tell are the best stories to use in your essays. Because they're good stories, and who doesn't want to read them? You can kind of use that same formula where you're looking for one of your core qualities that way. So say there's some story that's like, you're known for the time you did this one thing. I had this one kid, he was on water polo, but he was known for being the guy when the water polo team would get together that he'd go out and he'd love to man the grill and make these awesome steaks and hamburgers for everybody. And so they called him the grill master. So so he was sort of known for that. So we're thinking, okay, let's take that little story. What quality does that showcase about you? You know, it shows that you're a generous guy. You know, it shows that you like to support, you know, the team in your own way. You know, so you can take that story that that one of your favorite little stories and look and say, what quality is that showcasing about me? And if there's a quality, then you know you have a great essay to spin off of, and it will give it a good focus as well. You know, like the time, you know, oh yeah, remember the time we were driving around and I saw that free trampoline, and I love to collect junk, so we all piled it on my car. It was hilarious. Drove it home. Wow, that's a good little story. What is it showing about you? Well, it's showing that you're pretty scrappy guy. You know, you're resourceful. You find value in what other people don't. Boom, great essay topic. You know, so you're right. Think of those little stories, but then look at the quality what it's showing about you. And you can it's another way to find a great topic.
I love it because these are not things that you're going to list on your activity, you know, activity sheet that laundry is. It's not going to say, you know, Johnny Smith, grill master. It'll say water polo maybe. I picked up a free trampoline, you know, collector of free trampoline. That's not going to be listed there, but you can still find a way to talk about that, tie it back into a personal quality, and at the end of the day, it will impress the admission officers because they show you've been able to take something rather mundane and make something big out of it. You want your writing to be top quality. You want to impress them with your essay, but you don't want to be bragging or tooting your own horn every word of that 650-word Common App essay.
Right.
You've been listening to part 1 of a 2-part interview, so make sure you listen to part 2 for the rest. Thanks for listening to College Admissions Toolbox. Head over to www.collegeadmissionstoolbox.com to get more free tools and resources that will help you get into the colleges of your dreams.